Now that we have explored some of the reasons why debugging is important, let's work through some examples using hand tracing. The code example we are looking at is expected to swap the values of two variables. This is a very important algorithm, which is used frequently for working with data, in particular in algorithms that aim to organise or sort data. In our algorithm, we have two variables A and B, and we want to swap the value of these two variables so that the value of A becomes the new value of B, and that the value of B becomes the new value of A. In an example, if A equals 8 and B equals 4, swapping these values will make A equal to 4 and B equal to 8. We introduce the third variable C to temporarily store our values to make this possible. Take a moment to reflect on this code and ensure that you understand how it is working. A test case for our program is then that A equals 8 and that B equals 4. The expected output is A equals 4 and B equals 8. However, when we run this test case for our code, the output we see is that both A and B are equal to 4. This is not what we were expecting. Our test case has failed and we have found a bug. To locate this bug in our code, we are going to use hand tracing. One way of doing this is using a table with columns for each variable and recording the values of the program's variables after we execute each line of our code. We then execute the program line by line and record the value of all variables after each line executes. Let's try this process for our example. When we execute the first line, the value of A is 8. After the second line, the value of A is 8 and the value of B is 4. After the third line, the value of A is 8, the value of B is 4, and the value of C is 0. The fourth line is where things begin to change. After the fourth line, the value of A is 4, the value of B is 4, and the value of C is 0. After we execute the fifth line, the value of A is 4, the value of B is 4, and the value of C is 4. After the sixth line, we observe that nothing changes. A is still 4, B is 4, and C is 4. Now we can go back through the rows and see where our variables did not have the values we expected. We see that in this case, after the fourth line, the value 8 disappeared, which we know we need at the end. We have now found where the bug is in our code. We fix this by changing the code to be this, which correctly swaps the values of A and B. You can check to see that this works yourself using hand tracing. So let's look at another example. If we return to our sum problem, we want to compute the sum of the numbers 0, 1, 2, 3 and so on until a variable n inclusive of n. If n is negative, the sum should be 0. We choose the first value of n to be 5, so the expected output of sum is 15. If we run our code, we see that it does not pass our test case. The sum should be 15, and yet it is 6. What is happening? Let's use hand tracing to find out. We set up another table, having a column for each variable in our code. In our case, n is always equal to 5. As we did in the previous example, we will fill the table rows as we follow the code through line by line. The first value of sum is 0, and the first value of I is 0 as we go into the for loop. Inside the for loop, the value of sum becomes 1. In our next iteration of the for loop, the value of I is 1, and the value of sum is 2. In our next iteration of the for loop, the value of I is 2, next the value of the sum becomes 3. This continues in a similar pattern until I is equal to 5 and the value of sum is equal to 6. Can you spot the error? That's right, the code should be the sum equals sum plus I, not sum equals sum plus 1. We can fix this by changing this line in our code. These examples have shown you how you can use hand tracing to find bugs in your code. The more programs you debug, the quicker you will get at spotting and fixing your own bugs. A good place to start is to ensure that all your variables are initialized and that all the conditions and increments for for loops are correct. And that any if statements have the correct conditions, because this is where a lot of errors occur. But remember, if you are stuck and cannot find the bug from inspection of your code, the most effective technique is hand tracing the variable values.